Hawa. Pura vida, mi gente. Shabbat Shalom. Bendiciones. Blessings. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that on your Friday afternoon, your Friday evening, or whatever time of day it is where you are at. Thank you for being here. Hawa bless. Thank you, Hawa. Great Spirit, Tawada Hawa, for this moment. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Tawada Hawa. Yeah. Hawa. Drip, drip, drip. Yeah. That water. Tawada Hawa for allowing us to be here, have these platforms so we can be able to do this. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Just want to say before we get, hope everybody's doing well. Um, if you're going through anything bad or any ailments or diseases or anything like that, may Hawa bless you, protect you, heal you, keep you, you know, healthy, safe, energetic. And again, thanks for being here. Prayers out to all the people going through things. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. So we're going to get back into this book we've been reading. It's called The 10 Tribes of Israel, historically identified with the Aborigines of the Western Hemisphere by Mrs. Simon. This is from 1836. We're going to see what Mrs. Simon has now for us. She actually quotes a lot of primary sources and records, historical records. So it's a pretty good read. All right, again, this is from 1836. The 10 Tribes of Israel, historically identified with the Aborigines of the Western Hemisphere. We're going to read a couple pages of this, all right, on the Toltecs, all right, chapter. And then we're going to get a little presentation after that I've gathered together for you guys. Okay. We're going to go to page 193, I believe. Yeah, hold up. Yeah, 193. All right. And this chapter is on the Toltecs or Tulians, the Toltecs or Tulians, or the people coming out of Toulon. All right. Many names they're going to go over today. We're going to go over a lot of stories that we've actually gone over already when it comes to the migration legends and mythology and a lot of the ancient Mexican nations. And again, it says here, it says a northern but very polished nation, the Toltecs, appear in the mountains of Anahuac, Anahuacan, Anawaki, Anunnaki, huh? Anahuacan, Arawakan, Anahuac, Awa, 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 Anahuac, on the East Gulf of California, the East Gulf of California, meaning like Western Mexico, meaning on the East Gulf of the Red Sea. On the eastern part of the Red Sea, the original Red Sea, okay? It all links up. That's why you're going to read, we're going to learn today. It makes sense that that is the original Red Sea. All right, welcome. So Anahuac on the East Gulf of the Red Sea, the original, or the Gulf of California today, declares itself expelled from a country lying northwest of Rio Gila, or Guila, and called Huehuetlapalan. All right, and that means something. That is also connected to many of the North American nations. and brings with it paintings indicating year by year the events of its migration. It is very remarkable, moreover, that the names which the Toltecs bestowed on the cities they built were those of the countries which they had been compelled to abandon. From this circumstance, the origin of the Toltecs, the Chermex and Acolhuan, and the Aztecs, or the Mexica people, who spoke the same language, will be known if we ever discover in the North America or in Asia a people acquainted with the names of Huehuetlapalan, Aslan, another name, Teocolhuacan, all these are the mythical lands, Amaquemacan, Amaquemacan, Amarecan, Tehuago, and Cosula. Humboldt, page 179. The Toltecas, who were great artists, right? Artists such as sacred geometry architects, and who excelled in work and jewelry, probably recollected the words of David, "If I forget thee, O Jerusalem," and it is a fact notorious to all that wherever Jews exist or Israelites, the recollection of the temple and of its destruction to preserve among them the coming of the Messiah and their own restoration to the New Jerusalem and rebuilding of the temple continually occupy their thoughts. The retrospect, however, of the city and the holy hill, which their ancestors seem to have founded in the New World and called Cholula, after Jerusalem. Cherusala, Churula, Cherula, Cholula. We've gone over this before. I remember just now. We did a video and we were reading another book comparing the word, breaking it down, and how it sounds a lot like Jerusalem, Cherusala, Cholula, after Mount Zion, right? So after Jerusalem and Tlacti Chualtepec, or the hill of sacrifice, after Mount Zion, will not be so agreeable to the Israelites of the present day, or actually will not be so agreeable to the Chazars of the present day, as the prophet of the scepter returning to Judah. Antiquities of Mexico, page 388. Sahagún, in the first section of the 29th chapter of the 10th book of his History of New Spain, describing the manners of the ancient Toltecas, says, "The said Toltecas were good men who studied virtue in their actions. They never uttered a falsehood, and their style of address and salutation was, 'Sir, my elder brother,' or 'Sir, my younger brother.' And speaking, they never made use of an oath, but said, 'Verily it is so,' or 'Yeah, and 'Nay.' All right, just like 'Nay, yeah, yay, nay,' in court, right? There is something evangelical in the style of salutation and affirmation which Sahagún in the above passage ascribes to the Tulticas. That the Tulticas were the founders of many of the most splendid monuments of the New World. Many be inferred not only from the signification of the proper name Tultica, Tultica, which means an architect. All right? It's not a tribe, guys. That's what I've been trying to tell you guys. Tolteca were the architects, the master builders. Toltecas was a branch of the people that were the architects. But likewise, the figure of a feathered serpent is sometimes represented in mosaic on the walls, which undoubtedly referred to the god Quetzalcoatl. A gigantic serpent of this description ornaments the ruins of the fortress of Xoctoscaleo. All right, and check out my Quetzalcoatl review we did the other day, if you haven't. Since nothing appears more admirable in the architecture of the New World than the beautiful and durable mosaic ornaments which cover the walls of the palaces of Mitlan, it is highly probable that these structures were erected by the Toltecas, and they furnish an argument in favor of the belief that the Toltecas were originally a little colony, which in remote ages had settled in Anahuac, since we do not read that any other nation of the old continent except the Hebrews ever introduced that style of architecture. All right? They want to call it so-called Moorish. Whilst Josephus, it should be remarked, commends in the highest terms the skill which his countrymen displayed in uniting together the stones of which the walls of the temple were composed, the joints of which were scarcely visible. Speaking of the departure of Quetzalcoatl from the Toltecs to the distant country of Tlapalan, from whence he came, Humboldt observes, the resemblance of this name to Huetlapalan, the country of the Toltecs, appears not to be accidental. But how can we conceive that this white man dodged the hijack? The original primary sources never called him white. It says white bearded, meaning he had a white beard. White bearded man. Wise man. A white bearded wise man. Because their codices and everything else depicts him swarthy. Again, go check my Quetzalcoatl video the other day. But how can we conceive that this man, priest of Tula, should have taken his direction, as we shall presently find, to the southeast toward the plains of Cholula, and then to the eastern coast of Mexico, in order to visit this northern country, whence his ancestors had issued? Quetzalcoatl, in crossing the territory of Cholula, or Cholula, Cholula, yielded to the entreaties of the inhabitants, who offered him the reins of government. He dwelt 20 years among them, taught them to cast metals, ordered fast of 8 days, and regulated the intercalations of the Toltec year. He preached peace to men and would permit no other offerings to the divinity than the first fruits of the harvest, all right? We ain't talking about human sacrifice, we're talking about the first fruits, just like Israelites, just like they do in North America, the American Indians, the first fruits, the harvest feast, green corn and all that. At the period when the Aztecs or Mexicans, one of the 7 or 9 tribes of the Atlantis, took possession of the equinoctial region of New Spain, they already found the pyramidal monuments of Teotihuacan, of Cholula or Cholula, and of Papantla. They attributed these great edifices to the Tulians, a powerful and civilized nation who inhabited Mexico 500 years earlier, who made use of hieroglyphics, who computed time more precisely and had a more exact chronology than the greater part of the people of the old continent, so-called old. They're saying that this Tulians, who are going to see the ones they are going to call eventually Toltecs, they had a better calendar than most of the nations over there. They're saying Egypt, Babylon, and the other side of the world. Yeah, because those are copies from the original. The Aztecs knew not with certainty what tribe inhabited the country of Anahuac. All right, that's central Mexico. Anahuac was literally what ancient Mexico, most of central Mexico was called, before the Toltecs. And consequently, they believed that the houses of the deity of Teotihuacan and of Cholula was the work of the Toltecs, and assigned to them the greatest possible antiquity they could conceive. The truncated pyramids, so those monuments were actually there before the migration of the Toltecs, so this is what they're kind of talking about, but the Moctezuma and the Aztecs, later newcomers, they didn't know any better. They didn't know how far. They just attributed everything to the Toltecs, so-called. The truncated pyramid, called by Cortez the principal temple, was 79 meters in breadth at its base and 54 meters high. This was destroyed by the Spaniards. We shall describe the ancient ones. This group of pyramids is 8 leagues northeast of Mexico in a plain called Micoal, Path of the Dead. The 2 greatest, dedicated to the sun and moon, are surrounded by several small pyramids from north to south, from east to west. One is 55 and the other 44 meters in perpendicular height. According to M. Oteza's measurement, made in 1803, it is higher than the Mycerinus, the third of the great pyramids of Gaza in Egypt, and the length of its base nearly equal to that of the Sefren. The small ones are 10 meters high and are said to be the burying places of the chiefs of the tribes. The nucleus is composed of clay mixed with small stones and encased by a thick wall and porous amygdaloid. The construction recalls to mind that one of the Egyptian pyramids, Saqqara, right? So the Saqqara one is the one that looks like a step pyramid. You guys know, it's supposed to be the oldest one in Egypt, and yet it looks like the ones in America, right? And it's like a bad version of the ones in America. So they're looking at it in reverse, saying it resembles or recalls the Egyptian pyramid Saqqara, which has 6 stories, and which is according to Pocock, a mass of pebbles. See, a mass of pebbles and yellow mortar. It's really simple, covered on the outsides with rough stones. The 2 largest pyramids were covered with plates of gold. All right, you guys here? In America, something else. Again, in America, it's not just pebbles and yellow mortar. The 2 largest pyramids were covered with plates of gold, which were stripped off by the soldiers of Cortez. You see, so those pyramids we see in Mexico, a lot of them had gold. Listen, strips of gold covering them, plates of gold, just like what they were ripping off these walls in the Amazon. They were bringing to Father Crespi, because they told them these were on the wall hanging, these strips of gold. These had these big giant golden like plates that were actually decorating walls and in the jungle, temples in the jungle in Ecuador and the Amazon. All right, check out my previous videos with that, Father Crespi. We got to do a review soon again. So that's amazing, covered with plates of gold. Can you guys imagine? We're talking about Marco Polo. Marco Polo, they never found where he went. He went to the farthest east. He came to the Americas. He said he saw temples with plates of gold on them. Literally, temples with pearls in them, literally. And we've gone over all that, right? We found all that here in America. When they came, the Europeans, they wrote about it, what they saw. Continues, says the Bishop of Sumarago, a Franciscan monk, undertook the destruction of whatever related to the history, the worship, and the antiquity of the natives of America. He ordered also the demolition of these. All right? Demolition, destroy. The pyramid Papantla is on the east of the above group in the thick forest of Tajín. It was discovered by chance 30 years ago, for the Indians carefully concealed from the Spaniards whatever is an object of veneration. All right, so you guys hear that? Again, this book was written in 1836. They hadn't even discovered Papantla, which is one of the very ancient sites of Mexico, very ancient, until 1806. Yet they were already writing their books about ancient Egypt and all this other stuff when they hadn't even discovered stuff in America. Do you guys understand what I'm telling you? And that was the norm. They were just discovering a lot of these places in the Americas. It was all covered by jungle. So imagine 1806, this ancient place. So what if you found something here that you had to rewrite history about? Basically, guys, they did, and they never updated the history. Okay, so it was 7 stories. So we're talking about the pyramid of Papantla. It was 7 stories. It's more tapering than any other. And it's 18 meters high and 25 at the base. Okay. Let's see what we get here. You guys see that? See, this is what I'm saying. I've shown this a lot. I've shown this pyramid a lot. Do you guys see this? And this is an ancient place. Do you see how it resembles a lot of the temples of Asia? All right, we're talking about these places most likely had gold plates on them. Gold plates on them. We're talking about a real, true old world. Look at this. Right? The pyramids of Papantla. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Remembering. They got us sidetracked. They had us looking at the other side the whole time. I'm trying to make you remember. I'm trying to make you remember. See it down here, and then they got the other one next to it. Look at this ancient place. They just discovered in 1806, right? But they were already writing about ancient Egypt and ancient Greek mythology and all this, all this hijack. When they hadn't even discovered anything in the Americas, you know, they just starting in the 1800s, you know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Papantla, a majestic place. Look at it. Tell me that don't look like an ancient Asian temple or Indian. Tell me. Don't let your eyes don't deny what you see. Look at this. When they found it, look at that. Like a mythical place. Like, wow, look at it. In 1806, imagine. 1806. That's not that far long ago. But they already had their history made up. Look at it. Look at it from the side. This is another angle. Do you guys understand? Look at this. Yeah, wow, welcome. Thanks for being here. Let's continue. This is what I'm saying. We sometimes we just read, and you know, maybe you guys never heard of these places or know what they look like. So it just changes everything, right? When you're seeing them. The pyramid of Papantla, right? Now we saw it is on the east of the above group in the thick forest Tajín. It was discovered by chance 30 years ago, right? So 1806. So that was the measurements. It is built entirely of hewn stone of an extraordinary size and very beautifully and regularly shaped. Three staircases lead to the top. The covering of its steps is ornamented with the hieroglyphical sculpture and small niches. It has hieroglyphs on it. The greatest and the most ancient and most celebrated in Anahuac is the Teocalli of Cholula. Okay, and again, we're gonna do it again because you know I got videos on the pyramid of Cholula, which literally all these scholars are saying that it almost is like an exact copy of the Tower of Belus in Babylon, or the way it's described, because they haven't even found it over there. That's the thing; they haven't even found a lot of these ancient sites on the fake old world. They want you to believe that's where it's at, but Cholula is literally a mountain. Cholula is literally a mountain. It's the biggest, it's like by mass, you know, and the widest. It's wider than the pyramids of Egypt. It's so big, guys. There's so many layers. There's so many layers buried. It's huge. All this is man-made. And then they got covered by the mountain, right? And then they built their church on top, which I believe most likely because in a lot of these, like in the mountains in America or in a lot of these places, they actually just took over whatever was over there. This building was probably already there. They're trying to say they built it, right? The true old world, you get what I'm saying? So here's another little, you see, you got to climb all the way to the top. And this is what's inside. It's a huge complex, the Pyramid of Cholula, which resembles the Temple of Belus and all the mythology we got behind it about the giant Chelhua building it so he wouldn't get caught in the flood again. He was one of the survivors. And Noah, he was one of those giants that hopped aboard, something like that. You guys remember, we read all this stuff, you know? So check out my Cholula video, Pyramid Cholula video. This is an amazing pyramid, amazing site. The architecture, advanced architecture, you know? So the Teocalli of Cholula, a square house was discovered in the interior, built of stone and supported by cypress beams. The bricks were arranged like step work in the manner of some Egyptian edifices. Just like the Egyptian edifices, man. This is Egypt. There was an altar at the top dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the most mysterious person in the Mexican mythology. He was a white bearded. This is what I was trying to tell you earlier, right? It doesn't mean he was, they weren't saying ever he was pale. They were saying he had white beard. Old men of any color can get white beards from any color complexion. Touch your own hijacks. He was a white bearded man, high priest of Tula, and also a legislator, a lawgiver like Moses, like Joshua. Yeah. The Indians of Cholula have a remarkable tradition that the Great Pyramid was not originally destined to serve for the worship of Quetzalcoatl, which tradition is recorded in a manuscript of Pedro de los Rios in 1556. Rios, to prove the antiquity of this tradition, observed that it was contained in a sacred song which the Cholulans sang at their festivals, beginning with Tuliania, Hallelujah, Alleluia, Helal Hawa, words belonging to the no dialect at present known in Mexico. Literally, Hallelujah. Of the Temple of Palenque, M. Dupox. We're going to get more on Dupox later, little review of what he found in Palenque. We're going to get a preview here, but we're going to get the whole drop from Dupox. And it says on the Temple of Palenque, Mr. Dupox thus writes, Monsieur Dupox, right? He did an expedition in Palenque. It says he, in 1806, 1807, and I think 1805, he had gone there. It is impossible adequately to describe the interior decorations of this sumptuous temple. The sculptor and the painter seem to have embodied the most exalted conceptions of their art. The hieroglyphics which adorn this mysterious shrine are innumerable. They are carved on the surface of marble slabs of fine grain and of a deep buff color, ranged in horizontal rows. They occupy the center of the building, as in the sanctuary of the Presentation Temple. Our surprise was great on suddenly beholding a cross, okay, but closer examination of it convinced me that it was not the Holy Latin Cross which we adore. All right, that's what he was saying. Remember, he wrote that in the Foreign Quarterly Review. We're going to do a little review of it today. The Foreign Quarterly Review was published by Harvard University. This is this is what they were writing about in Palenque. I wish it were in my power to explain the signification of the historical figures which so conspicuously adorn the walls of these temples, a task less difficult than to decipher the meaning of the hieroglyphics. It would appear that this nation had two methods of expressing its ideas, the one by letters or alphabetical signs, the other by obscure and mysterious symbols. These symbols, infinitely diversified in form, were disposed in parallel rows, both vertically and horizontally, on the same stone, so as frequently to form right but never acute angles. This peculiarity in their arrangement is not unworthy of attention. In each line the same kind of symbols often occur, and the human heads, which are always in profile, are uniformly turned to the left, a circumstance which leads me to suppose that, like Hebrew writings, those inscriptions were read from right to left. These immense ruins, he adds, scattered over a vast tract of country, and the greater portion of them buried beneath the soil. This is in the 1800s. He just got there in 1805, 1806. Palenque, everything is still buried. If you Google Palenque, right? This is what I'm saying. Since we're live, we're going to take advantage. Palenque, right? Palenque is majestic. There's so many pyramids there. It's amazing. It's an amazing place. An archaeological site, And it has this temple right here with a tower. We're going to talk about this, okay? And then it has other pyramids. Palenque was just discovered in the 1800s, 1700s, but it didn't gain popularity until the 1800s when they actually funded an expedition to go there. And that's what we're reading right now. Mr. M. Dupoc's expedition. All right, in Palenque. If you only knew what this temple was, we might talk about it a little bit today. So, these immense ruins, he adds, scattered over a vast tract of country, scattered, there's so many, they're still probably unfound right now, and the greater portion of them buried beneath the soil, awaken in the mind of the spectator the liveliest feeling of curiosity and interest. That's me. And I used to see this growing up. I used to be like, wow, makes me so curious and interested. The following passage is extracted from Don Antonio del Rio's narrative of his visit to the ruins of Palenque, in which he takes occasion to mention other ancient temples in Yucatan, right? So Del Rio is the guy who went in the 1700s before Dupox. And Dupox was motivated by Del Rio to go and continue what he had found and wrote about. he went on his own. He did a little expedition in the 1700s, not only there, but in Guatemala and Mexico and different other parts of the Yucatan. And Del Rio, sorry. The Reverend Father de Soga, a Franciscan friar, many years collected of alms destined for the Holy House at Jerusalem, who in prosecuting the duties imposed upon him from his situation repeatedly traversed the province, fortunately happening to be at Palenque, favored me with a circumstantial account of that country, of which I now avail myself in his own words. At the distance of 20 leagues from Merida southward are remains of some stone edifices. One very large building has withstood the ravages of time. The natives give it the name Oxmult. It stands on an eminence and measures 200 yards on each facade. The apartments of the exterior corridor contain pillars with figures in medio relievo and are decorated with serpents, etc., in stucco, besides which are statues of men with palms in their hands in the act of beating drums. All right, we had drums, yeah, beating drums and dancing, resembling in every respect those observable in the buildings of Palenque. They're comparing a site in Meridas, okay? Haha. And that's the end of this chapter. Okay, don't go anywhere because I got some more books to read. Okay, don't go anywhere, guys. I got some more books to read. But we are basically going to continue this book, and we're going to get into South America a little bit with the so-called Incas and the nations of South America on the next chapter of this book. But at least we got through this one. Pretty good reading here. All right, we're going to go to the other readings right now.
We're going to read from this book. It's called A Diary in America, with remarks on its institutions. Part 2. It says by Captain Marriott C.B. in 3 volumes. This is volume 3 and made in 1839, right? And it is not many years ago that the ruins of a whole city with a wall nearly 7 miles in circumference, with castles, palaces, and temples, again, castles and palaces and temples, evidently of Hebrew or Phoenician architecture, was found on the river Palenque. All right, we're going to get into this Foreign Quarterly Review, written scholarly in a journal of the travels and expedition done in Palenque in 1805, 1806, and 1807. All right, and we're going to see what they found there. And again, as it correlates in this other book, again, we're reading A Diary in America with regards on its institutions, part 2, volume 3. And it's telling us that not until recently, not many years ago, that the ruins of a whole city with a wall nearly 7 miles in circumference, with castles, palaces, and temples evidently of Hebrew or Phoenician architecture, was found on the river Palenque. The 35th number of the Foreign Quarterly Review contains an interesting account of those antiquities. And we got that. All right, we went in that Foreign Quarterly Review. So that's coming up. Stay tuned. The ruins of the city of Guatemala in Central America, as described by De Real in 1782, when taken in conjunction with the extraordinary, I may say wonderful antiquity spread over the entire surface of the country, awaken recollections in the specimens of architecture which carry us back to the early pages of history, and prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that we, who imagined ourselves to be the natives of a new world, but recently discovered and inhabit a continent which rivaled the splendor of Egypt and Syria and was peopled by a powerful and highly cultivated nation from the old world. And again, where is the true old world? We are between Lemuria and Atlantis. This is the old world, as it says right here, as it's just told you, all right, that we thought this was the new continent, he says, but actually it rivals the splendor of Egypt and Syria. It was peopled by a powerful and highly cultivated nation from the old world, because they found so many things that resembled the old world that they only could conclude that the old world, so-called old world people on that other side supposedly came over here. But this is where they were originally. This is the true old world. Dodge the hijack, dodge your own hijack. When we speak of what is called Mexican antiquities, we must not confound the rude labors of modern times with the splendid perfections which distinguish the efforts of those who reared the Egyptian pyramids. Okay? Again, when we speak of what is called Mexican antiquities, right? All these things they're finding, these temples, these high civilization, this high art, this high science, right? In Mexico, right? We must not confound the rude labors of modern times with the splendid perfections which distinguish the efforts of those who reared the Egyptian pyramids and built the temples of Thebes and Memphis. It is not Mexican antiquities, but the antiquities of Toltecan. And in the addition to the ruins of Palenque, on this our continent, there are pyramids larger than those of Saqqara in Egypt, at Cholula, Otamba, Paxaca, Mitlan, Tlaxcola, and on the mountains of Texcoco, together with hieroglyphics, planispheres, and zodiacs, a symbolic and phonetic alphabet, papyrus, metopes, triglyphs, and temples and buildings of immense grandeur, military roads, aqueducts, viaducts, posting stations and distances, bridges of great grandeur and massive character, all presenting the most positive evidences of the existence of a powerful, enterprising nation which must have flourished 2,000 years before the Spanish conquest. Take into consideration, get a clear perspective of what they're telling us here, what they didn't teach us in school, the high civilized science in these cities, the grandeur of the architecture, right? And all these places, larger pyramids than in Saqqara, Egypt, in not one city, but Cholula, Otamba, Paxaca, Mitlan, Tlaxcola, and the mountains of Texcoco. And again, these contain hieroglyphics, planispheres, and zodiacs, a symbolic and phonetic alphabet, the alphabet, Phoenician, Phenuk, Enoch, Phenuk, Enoch, papyrus, metopies, triglyphs, and temples and buildings of immense grandeur, military roads, aqueducts, viaducts, posting stations and distances, bridges of great grandeur and massive character, all presenting the most positive evidences of the existence of a powerful, enterprising nation, which must have flourished 2,000 years before the Spanish conquest. Take, for example, the description of the temple at Palenque, which Lord Kingsborough, in his travels, do not only declares was built by the Jews and is a copy of Solomon's temple, a copy of Solomon's temple in Palenque, a copy of Solomon's temple. How many temples did exist in the Old Testament? Well, we know there was a destruction of the first temple, and then there was a reconstruction of the second temple. Are these the two copies they're telling us here? Where is the duplicate? All right, we have to really start seeing with a clear perspective. Drakan, surf the wave and research this. We are finding these places. They are here. It is part of you. This is the true old world. Again, it says it's a copy of Solomon's temple, but which no doubt is precisely the model of the temple described by Ezekiel. Again, let me go back up because, all right, we're talking about, again, take for example the description of the temple of Palenque, all right, which Lord Kingsborough, he said in his travels, not only he declares, and we're talking about Palenque, right, the temple at Palenque, was built by the Jews and is a copy of Solomon's temple, but which no doubt is precisely the model of the temple described by Ezekiel. So we're going to get into this book again, or this journal, scholarly journal called the Foreign Quarterly Review. And again, I think this has at least 40 volumes. I was able to find this article, this great article in volume, this is 18. And this was written in, between 1836 and 1837. So on page 17 of this journal, we got the article here. Basically, is the expedition that Dupax, a French archaeologist, anthropologist, went and did in 1805, 1806, and 1807, and he wrote about it. We are not surprised at the enthusiasm excited in Del Rio, Dupax, and others more recent travelers while surveying and describing this vast and singular structure. Neither are we indeed surprised at the inference drawn by Lord Kingsborough, especially as it is in full conformity with the Jewish theory of American origination, which pervades his volumes, that this vast pile is built after the model of Solomon's temple. Again, we're talking about ruins in Palenque, Mexico. All right? Solomon's temple. Abrupt and extravagant as such as proposition may appear, we are quite willing to admit that there would be strong architectural grounds for the inference, provided his main theory were correct. The structure, as we have said, is calculated to awaken surprise and admiration. It may be appropriately termed an ecclesiastical city rather than a temple. Again, it may be appropriately termed an ecclesiastical city rather than a temple. We're talking about Palenque. Within its vast precincts, there appears to be contained, as indeed was in some measure, the case with the area that embraced the various buildings of Solomon's temple. Again, within its vast precincts, there appears to be contained, as indeed was in some measure, the case with the area that embraced the various buildings of Solomon's temple. So not just the temple, but there, all the other structures that surrounded Solomon's temple is also seems to be accurately depicted in Palenque. That's what he's saying. A pyramidal tower, various sanctuaries, sepulchres, a small and large quadrangular court, one surrounded, as we have said, by cloisters, subterranean initiatory galleries beneath, oracles, courts of justice, high places, and cells or dwellings for the various orders of the priest. It has been brought forward as a theory by Lord Kingsborough and others, Cabrera, the commentator on Del Rio included, that the 10 lost tribes of the Israelites, who were carried away captive during the reign of Hoshea, king of Judah, by Salmanaser, is that Genghis Khan, king of Assyria, and who were by him scattered among the different nations of northeastern Asia, subjected to his rule, passed over into America, which they originally peopled, and that to this circumstance is attributed the striking and almost entire analogy alleged to exist between the ancient Jewish rites, customs, laws, manners, and forms of building and the whole series of Mexican antiquities, subjected to the public eye in the illustrations of the works under review. All right, so did you guys catch that? All right, so I think he was saying that in their theory, Lord Kingsborough and Cabrera and all them saying that they were carried away to Asia or Assyria, right, and actually passed over into America, which they originally peopled. So they were over here before they came from Asia. We may in passant notice Lord Kingsborough's startling supposition that the great temple of Palenque and the temple of Solomon were built after the same model. Again, we may in passant notice, how Lord Kingsborough's startling supposition that the great temple of Palenque and the temple of Solomon were built after the same model. Where is this same model then? Where is the original model? So they notice so much of a resemblance and exact description of what we read in the Bible that they're saying it has to be modeled from the same source. But what is the original source? This is the true old world. Again, read between the lines. Continuing says, with with the disproved theory of the builders of Palenque being Jews. This hypothesis must also be admitted to fail. But there is more truth, he says, in that it would at first sight appear. There exists, in fact, a strong resemblance between some of the details of both, and the resemblance arises from there being one Syrian model for both. If his lordship had merely argued for the similarity of the ground plan of both, we should have been prompted to concur with his inference. We will go further and say that the model of the final Jewish temple, which Ezekiel describes as a future point of reunion for the whole restored and united Jewish family, and which either imitates or supersedes that of Solomon, is almost precisely like the model of the temple of Palenque. He is letting us know that he's going to go further, and he's going to say that the model of the final Hebrew temple, not Jewish, the final Hebrew temple, which in the book of Ezekiel is described as a future point of reunion, a future point of talking about you. Are we going to gather in these ancient cities again, reclaim? So a future point of reunion for the whole restored and united Hebrew lost tribes family, in which either imitates or supersedes that of Solomon. All right, supersedes that of Solomon. It's almost precisely like the model of the temple of Palenque. They're letting us know, people, that what Ezekiel is describing is found here in Palenque, in Mexico. As like in many respects, as anticipative description can be supposed to coincide with an extant exhibition of the same model. This, again, scholarly journal called the Foreign Quarterly Review, Volume 18, starts on page 31. Again, look it up, read it for yourself. I mean, you see there's so much info here, just in one little article, proving who these people were. And we got to dodge all those hijacks, talking about they came from other places. All right? This is the true old world. So you are going to find all the ancient peoples here. You are going to get stories of giants being expelled from promised lands. That's in our writings here. All right? So again, this was basically referenced. This article was completed using all these collections and references, as you see here. You know, the main book, Antiquities of Mexicanes. You know, thanks to Hawa for the water, for the guidance, for the inspiration, for opening the seals, for keeping his promise. All right, the time has come. The seals are open. Again, Harvard University, Foreign Quarterly Review, Volume 18. Check out Antiquities Mexicanes, the 9 volumes. Go through it yourself. All of these works right here you see in front of you. Do the research. From the book Anacalypsis, an attempt to draw aside the veil of the Sadic Isis, or an inquiry into the origin of languages, nations, and religions, by the late Godfrey Higgins, Esquire. Volume 2, 1836. It is necessary to observe here that tribes, both of Negroes and bearded men, were found in South America. Again, it is necessary to observe here that tribes, both of Negroes and bearded men, were found in South America, right? And you see the footnote, it says number 4, down in the bottom. Number 4 is Antiquities of Mexico, Volume 6, page 290 to 291. And the best thing about that is that I have this book, so let's go to it right now. Again, the book is called, the source that they're using is Antiquities of Mexico. It says here, comprising facsimiles of ancient Mexican paintings and hieroglyphics by Lord Kingsborough, the drawings on stone by Aglio, in 7 volumes. Again, this is volume 6. So let's go to page 290. All right, so actually we're on page 291, and towards the middle of the page, we're going to start right here. It says, the language of the Mixes or Mixtecs, as the writer affirms, their thick beards, barbas largas, cosa rara en aquellas partes, their scanty population, the hatred which they bore to the other tribes of Indians, and above all, the hatred which the Spaniards bore to them, and the cruel manner in which they hunted and exterminated them, suggests the idea that the Mijes or Michis or Meshis, Mesheks, right, Moses, as they are variously called, might have been a colony of Jews, again, a colony of Hebrews, who, like the Hebrews discovered by Montesino in the neighborhood of Cartagena, all right, Colombia, might have fortified themselves in the mountains and so have hoped to escape servitude either to the Indians or the Spaniards. It would be surprising if it were fair to presume from the silence of Spanish historians either want of information on their part or of research and curiosity on the part of others, instead of ascribing the reserve to other causes, to find that scarcely any mention is made in their writings of a bearded nation and blacks discovered amongst the Indians. Okay, again, they're saying that if they would stop with their reservation of holding information, of not going deeply investigating things because of the prejudices they're bringing with them, right? All right, their whole perspective of what they think history is and reality is. If they wouldn't do that, right? And they would actually take notice and make mention in their writings of the bearded nations, right? That existed here, bearded nations, and the blacks, it says here, that's the hijack, copper-colored tribes, so-called Negro, right? Blacks, discovered amongst the Indians. And we're going to go to that footnote, but let's keep reading. It says, although a black skin and a bearded visage afford the surest argument of a mixture of foreign blood with that of the smooth and copper-colored Indian race. From a painting which occurs in the 87th page of the Codex Vaticanus, it would appear that the Capotecas were a bearded people, as well as the Mixtecs or Mixtecs. The two nations bordered on each other, and alliances might sometimes have taken place between them. If the Mixtecs were Jews or Hebrews, right, it is probable that their ancestors constructed the palaces of Mitlan and other splendid monuments in the territory of Capotecas, which Mr. Dupox is not inclined to attribute to the art and industry of the latter people. So we got a little bit of that in the Foreign Quarterly Review. Pretty much same information that we're going through, old world evidence, hieroglyphic Egyptian, writings, everything. And it's all there, Hebrew, everything. Just like Lord Kingsborough is letting us know that, there's a strong correlation and resemblance to the Mesheks or Mesheks being Hebrews. And not only that, right, but then he's also letting us know black, all right, amongst the Indians, black skin and bearded visage afford the surest argument of mixture of foreign blood, because the way he sees it is that all so-called Negroes came out of Africa, in his view, right? But you were already here. That's why they found blacks, so-called blacks, amongst the Indians. But when you go look at the walls and everything else, all you're going to see is so-called black, right? Copper-colored tribes of America, all right? Continuing, it says that the Mixtecs were not the barbarous people that Spanish authors describe them, is evident from the superior knowledge which they possessed of the art of Indian warfare. For whilst the Tlaxcaltecas, with an army of 150,000 men, could scarcely preserve their independence against Montezuma, and had in fact consented to the payment of a slight tribute. So again, we went all the way to Lord Kingsborough's book because we were reading this book, right, on apocalypsis, and it was saying to us that it is necessary to observe here that tribes both of Negroes and bearded men were found in South America. So we went to verify the source. We everywhere were met with the Mexican divine names ending in tle or Tle as Teotle, that is D-O or God Tle. It has been observed by Lord Kingsborough as well as by almost all the Spanish authors, that the Mexican language, again, it has been observed by Lord Kingsborough, as well as by almost all Spanish authors, that the Mexican language is so full of Hebrew words as to be almost Hebrew. So we have seen God everywhere crucified and suspended from the cross. Again, he's saying in the Mexican hieroglyphs and codices, he's saying that we have seen God everywhere crucified and suspended from the cross. We have found the sacred animal, the llama, or sheep. Again, sheep. And you know, we just got this in Lord Kingsborough's book about the llama or lamb, right? So we did have our type of sheep, and we did have shepherds then to tend these sheep we had over here. We have found the mythos of the crucified Savior. Again, we have found, my people, the mythos of the crucified Savior here in America, in Mexico. We have found everything at last to center in the sun. The word tle, T-L-E, is confessed not to be understood by the Mexicans nor by the Spaniards, who call it, for that reason, merely a termination. All these matters considered, I think it may be the same as the word tle or tla, the Hebrew name of the sign of the zodiac, Agnes or Aries. In Hebrew, it means when spelled with the tau, tle, hanged or suspended. So tle, he's saying in Hebrew, when spelled with the tau, right, the tle, hanged or suspended. Hanged or suspended. Cross, hanged on a cross, suspended on a cross. I believe it meant crucified by hanging on a cross. There is scarcely a page of Lord Kingborough's work which does not exhibit proofs of the anxiety of the Spanish government to suppress the information which I have just now detailed, and which does not also show that it comes to us through the medium of the most unwilling of witnesses. All right, so he's letting us know that, Lord Kingsborough has so much there's so much info and proof, correlation, proof, anthropology, historical anthropology, scientific research, and his accounts, right, that show what this person in this book, Anacapolypse, is talking about, proven, and that the Spanish government has gone through much anxiety to suppress the information. All right, they have basically held this from you. They don't teach you this in school. This is the other half of the story Bob Marley's talking about, and you are ancient. What is in America? What can be found here? What they did find here and wrote about is never told to us. All right, until now. Every contrivance which was possible was resorted to in order to prevent its arrival in Europe. And this accounts for the extraordinary and systematic opposition to the admission of strangers into New Spain. All right, so they made everything possible to make sure what they were finding, the news they were coming up, the archaeology, the anthropology, right, what they were writing, recording, was too much for that side of the world, the so-called old world, for them to know that they were basically censoring, right? They were going through extraordinary and systematic opposition to the admission of strangers into New Spain. They didn't even want anybody going into New Spain that might open their mouth and tell the other people what's going to happen. Because look what it says here. It says, all people likely to be intelligent, such as physicians, persons suspected of heresy, were prohibited from going thither. So if you had a rational thought, if you were smart enough to think on your own and do your own research and conclusions, right? You weren't allowed to go there if you were intelligent. So how do they measure who's intelligent, who's not? So who are they sending over? So, how do you know who's intelligent, who's not, until you really actually experience time with that person, right? So they were sending these type of people over And so when they were coming over here, they didn't think twice. They weren't riding to just taking gold. They were just like barbarians. They were savage. They were the savages, unintelligent ones. You see, admittedly, what was happening? They were sending unintelligent people who did not know medicine, right? Or anybody rebelling against their crown who might go against anything that they were doing, because they knew then they would see what really was over here and who was over here. The reason assigned by the Spanish government was that they were prevented going, that they might not create disputes and prevent conversions. All right. The author of the notes to Lord Kingsborough's book says that he believes that the Jews colonized America and held it for 1,000 years. The close connection between the Americans and the Old World was long ago seen, notwithstanding all the exertions of the Spaniards to keep mankind in the dark, and fruitless endeavors were made by Grotius and others to find a cause for it. All right, so there's a close connection between the Americans and the Old World. I've been telling you, we've been telling you. Thank you, Hawa, for all the scholars, for all the people you've put in my path that have taught me, put me in the right perspective, had me thinking clearly and seeing clearly, right? That, this is the true Old World. So, of course, there is a connection between the Americans and the Old World. The people of North America were taught by pen to have an unaccountable likeness to the Jews, and the Masajati were thought to be found in Massachusetts. So this last sentence that says the people of North America were taught by Penn, they're talking about William Penn, the founder and the person they named Pennsylvania after, right? In volume 6, page 79, the Mexican courts are shown to have had exactly the same number of judges as those of the Jews or Hebrews. Again, the Mexican courts are shown to have had exactly the same number of judges as those of the Hebrews, that their sacred numbers were exactly the same, and that both nations kept fast for exactly the same number of days. Lord Kingsborough says the common law of every state in Europe has been confessedly modeled after the Mosaic law. This is very important observation, and I think its truth will not be disputed. But I think there is no other way of accounting for it than to go to my primeval nation. The common law in most states is evidently older than Christianity. We are told that St. Augustine brought Christianity into this island in the year 596. But was there no Christianity in the time of Constantine or before? Lord Kingsborough says, the affinity between the Mexican and the Hebrew laws is greater than between the latter and those of any nation with which we are acquainted. Okay, so I think he's saying that it's more affiliated and has more similarity, the Mexican, right, to Hebrew than to Christian, to the latter. They circumcised with a stone knife, the use of which was expressively ordered. It is remarkable that the circumcision of the Jews should have been performed with a knife made of stone, which is emphatically noticed in the Bible. All right, the Hebrews used a stone knife, the Mexicans used a stone knife for circumcision. Lord Kingsborough has gone to an enormous length in proving that the Mexican rites, ceremonies, etc. were almost precisely the same as those of the Jews, and that they must consequently have been brought by the Jews to Mexico. But one most important observation offers itself on this. We possess what we believe to be the knowledge of all the Jewish rites, history, etc. in Syria, but this is not the way all these things are known by the Americans. All the things said to have taken place in Western Syria, both with Jews and Christians, are said to have been acted in America. Again, all the things said to have taken place in Western Syria, both with Jews or Hebrews And Christians are said to have been active in America. All right, it happened here in America as well. Which one is the duplicate? And the case in a great measure is the same in India and China. The third India, this is India. All right, there is the same standing still of the sun, the same populi fugia, the same deluge and persons saved in a ship, the same immaculate conception, the same crucifixion and resurrection, but they were all in the American country, not in Syria. All right, again, all the things we just went over, the immaculate conception, the crucifixion, the deluge, right? All the same stories that we hear in the Old Testament, the so-called Bible, happened in the American country, not in Syria. All right, so now we're in the book, the works of Hubert Howie Bancroft. All right, this is volume 5. The Native Races series he has is a lot of volumes. We actually read from his books. The Mexicans have a tradition of a journey undertaken at the command of a god and continued for a long time under the direction of certain high priests. High priests led them, right? Who miraculously obtained supplies for their support. Miraculously. You hear this, right? This bears a striking resemblance to the Hebrew story of the wandering in the desert. And who were they with? Moses, right? After the Exodus. All right, another correlation here. This is again from Garcia, another person. There are striking similarities between the Babel, flood, and creation myths of the Hebrews and the Americans. Both Jews and Mexicans were fond of appealing in their adjurations to the heaven and the earth. Both were extremely superstitious and firm believers in prodigies. The character and history of Christ and Huitzilopochtli, again, Huitzilopochtli, remember that, present certain analogies. Right? Christ, they mean Meshach, an anointed one, a Messiah. That's what they mean. They don't mean Jesus. The Mexican temple, like the Jewish, faced the east. As amongst the Jews, the ark was a sort of portable temple in which the deity was supposed to be continually present, and which was accordingly borne on the shoulders of the priest as a sure refuge and defense from their enemies. So amongst the Mexicans and Indians of Michoacan and Honduras, an ark was held in the highest veneration and was considered an object too sacred to be touched by any but the priest. All right, the same religious reverence for the ark is stated by Adair, all right, to have existed among the Cherokee and other Indian tribes inhabiting the banks of the Mississippi, and his testimony is corroborated by the accounts of Spanish authors of the greatest veracity. The nature and use of the ark having been explained, it is needless to observe that its form might have been various, although scripture declares that the Hebrew ark was of the simplest construction. And again, it would appear from many passages of the Old Testament that the Jews believed in the real presence of God in the ark, as the Roman Catholics believe in the real presence of Christ in the sacrament, from whom it is probable the Mexicans borrowed the notion that he whom the heaven of heavens cannot contain, and whose glory fills all space, could be confined within the precincts of a narrow ark, and be borne by a set of weak and frail priests. All right, so they're telling you that a lot of Indian tribes had an ark. They went to war with it. It was sacred to them. It was carried by priests. All right, every time they stopped with it somewhere, they created a tabernacle or a temporary temple for it. Right, just like the Hebrews, right, starts to hijack with Jews, right? But again, we're in the book The Native Races of volume 5 by Hubert Bancroft, and we're just more different sources, the same thing, right? We also read in the last part with the Seminole, who also had an ark. All right, if the belief of the Mexicans had not been analogous to that of the ancient Jews, the early Spanish missionaries would certainly have expressed their indignation of the absurd credulity of those who believed that their omnipresent God, Huitzilopochtli, was carried in an ark on priests' shoulders. All right? But of the ark of the Mexicans, they say, but little fearing, as it would appear to tread too boldly on the burning ashes of Mount Sinai.
Wow, yeah. So that's probably where we're gonna leave it off, guys. Appreciate you guys, just being here. I hope you guys enjoyed the little reading and breakdown. You know, that book is pretty good, so we're gonna keep reading it. A lot more new books. I just like to go over a lot of info. We got lot of new followers and a lot of stuff we've gone over. We just got to kind of review because you see how it all connects as we keep reading new things and from different sources, correlating older sources we've read. With every other topic we talk about here, you start seeing, just start connecting all the dots. It's just so obvious to see. This is the true old world. I hope you understand who you are. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are protected and blessed. I hope you seek the Most High. I hope you honor the Great Spirit just like you honor your ancestors. Your ancestors honored the Great Spirit. This is what we're learning. This is what we're talking about. And, it's Shabbat Shalom. It's Shabbat Shalom. Yeah. Yeah. So they said Negroes with beards, huh? How many how many times we're gonna go over that before the whole world understands and knows what you guys know? Imagine in this community, and we're trying over there to debate and trying to convince others. You guys really don't have to. It's just gonna happen. Great Spirit, Most High, they're gonna make sure. You know, wow, for real. That water. Appreciate all the people in the live chat today. Thanks for coming to, chatting up with the rest of the community, being respectful. All right, appreciate it. We're gonna go ahead and hand you your Friday evening back. All right, appreciate you guys making the time to be here. Also, anybody who watched it after, this was a live recording. Most High over everything, MHOE. You already know me. Ha, it's fine. Yeah, appreciate everybody. I love that you guys love the channel. Motivation, it's all meant to be. Put your faith in the Great Spirit. Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to, again, all the music producers as well. Thank you guys for keeping it real. Oye, 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 es lo tuyo. Oye, mi hermano. Oye, mi hermano. My brother. Mi hermano. Mi hermana, my sister. Mi familia, my family. Mi tribu, my tribe. Mi gente, my people, pura vida, pure life, shout out to Chase. Shout out to Chase, man. We're gonna go with one of the little Chase's little mixes right here. Thank you to all the music producers. I see one in the crowd, all make 12. Shout out to Science, Chase, aka Chase. Shout out to all my moderators, all my people. I see y'all, my moderators, the real ones. I mean real, I mean everybody listening. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the time. I appreciate it. It's a blessing. And I hope you're blessed and protected in these crazy times. Yes, be smart. Don't follow people blindly. I mean, in every aspect of life, like in YouTube and politics and everything. Just like, you got to measure people's heart, where they heart at. And if it's the Great Spirit in their life, it's the Most High in their life, they got real love. Or will they walk over you when you're hurting? And if you're hurting right now, I hope the Great Spirit, the Most High, gives you peace physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Hope you're blessed and protected. Hope you seek the Most High if you don't. Yeah, this ain't church, this ain't religion, I'm just talking, you know, I'm just trying to keep it natural. Shout out to keeping it natural or natural bala. Shout out to natural bala. Gotta keep it natural. I'm just trying to keep it natural. Be like water. You guys understand? You gotta be like water, like agua, 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 water, agua, agua. Pura vida, mi gente. Take care. Take care. Be wise. Don't let them trick you or even try to fool you. You got a mind of your own. So go to hell if what you preaching. Yeah. Politricks. Don't let them fool you, people. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.